This lesson is about pronouns and adjectives that behave largely like your most simple paradigm for an adjective: kalos, kale, and kalon. Kalos, kale, and kalon are a typical example of what I refer to as a 2-1-2 adjective, second declension masculine, first declension feminine, and a second declension neuter. If you know your paradigms for nouns, like kalos, second declension masculine nouns, then you know kalos. If you know your first declension feminines that end in eta, they don't deviate from kale or vice versa, and same thing with kalon. If you know second declension neuters, then you already know how to decline kalon. There is a group, however, mostly of pronouns and one adjective, that don't follow the kalos, kale, kalon pattern. They deviate slightly from it. The main deviation is that in the neuter, the nominative singular, the accusative singular, which makes sense because in the neuter the nominative and accusative are exactly the same. The nominative singular neuter, the accusative singular neuter, as well as the vocative singular neuter, they end in omicron instead of omicron nu. It's a very minor difference. Let's look at what it is in practice so you can see that difference. You just have to memorize those words and be able to recognize them. You can see it right from the lexical entry. For this relative pronoun, hos, he, ho, that what's missing, that you would expect, is a nu at the end of this form. If it follows that 2-1-2 pattern of kalos, kale, kalon, you would expect a nu at the end, but it doesn't have it. The word hos, he, ho means who, which, or what. It's the relative pronoun. It refers back to an antecedent. You would say something like, that is the girl whom I love, and you'd use a relative pronoun for the whom. Whom refers back to the girl in the sentence, which is the antecedent. That's how a relative pronoun works. This isn't the time to really teach a lesson on relative pronoun, but just a quick synopsis of what it is. So there's the lexical entry. Otherwise, this word behaves just like kalos, kale, kalon. So when you move into the genitive, dative, and accusative singular for the masculine, feminine, or neuter, there are no surprises. It's just the neuter form that is somewhat surprising. Don't forget that for all neuters, the nominative and accusative, singular and plural, I'm not writing a plural at this moment, are always the same. Note the accents. Note that the masculine and the neuter are largely the same. The genitive and dative, that is to say, are the same. And the nominative and accusative aren't drastically different. The accents, you have to learn them mostly through observation, but you can see some patterns emerge. The nominative has the acute accent in all three genders. Then you get into the circumflex, and then you go back to the acute for the accusative. Nominative, accusative have things in common. Genitive, dative have things in common. And note in red alternative forms for the genitive. This one perhaps is written not neatly enough. It's omicron, omicron, upsilon, and the masculine and the neuter are the same. Some alternative forms that you will indeed see in Homer. Generally speaking, even in regard to the accents, however, these forms follow the pattern of kalos, kale, kalon. The plurals do have some irregularities, not surprisingly. Here's an alternative form for the dative, an alternative from the dative. Note that the masculine and neuter are the same in the genitive and datives. Genitive and datives are the same. Note that the nominative and accusative, like all neuters in the language, in Greek and Latin, all neuters in the nominative singular and accusative singular are the same. Omega nu for the genitive, plural. You see the iota for the dative. Here's an iota subscript also. Iota at the end with a sigma. And then this ending you've seen before, this ending you've seen before. And this ending is actually not strange. It's the same as Latin, by the way. Bacterium in the plural becomes bacteria. Datum becomes data. So again, this behaves like kalos, kale, kalon. It's a little hard since it doesn't have you might expect some kind of noun or something, or even a few letters in a stem. This relative pronoun just has the vowels, so it's a kind of tricky example, but a great one to start with because it is not that easy. Even though it behaves mostly like kalos, kale, kalon, has one single exception, this is probably difficult to learn for somebody seeing it for the first time. Easier to see it with this word. This word means that. It's a demonstrative pronoun. Has an irregularity in the genitive, masculine and neuter the same. Note the dative and the genitive in particular. It's missing the nu. It's missing the nu right here in the red. Accent doesn't change on the feminine form. Accent does change from a circumflex to an acute to an acute to a circumflex, from a circumflex to an acute to an acute to a circumflex. I didn't write out this form a second time, but I will just put the accents there. And that's a minor deviation from kalos, kale, kalon. It looked a little bit more difficult in the previous example, the relative pronoun, hos, he, ho, but probably easier to see in this example, this group of words. I should point out that in Homer, he does not always place the e. He sometimes uses instead of ekkena, he uses just kena. Instead of ekkenai, he uses just kenai. That's true in the singular and the plural. I didn't point it out in the last screen. I should have. But sometimes he drops the e in the singular or the plural in any of those case endings, probably for metrical purposes. Entirely for metrical purposes. Look at the masculine and the feminine. The accent changes once to an acute and doesn't change back in the accusative. Starts out there. The accent is not your main focus of this lesson. It's memorizing the endings and this small deviations. Oi on oisi or ois, and then us. Feminine changes much more drastically. Look at the genitive form. It's got three options: a on, et on, or on, and the accent changes. But mostly you're looking at the omega nu, and omega nu. And then the ac or the ace. Sometimes it just drops the iota. Accent, still an acute, like it was for the genitive, changed though from the nominative, plural. And then as, pretty standard normal ending. The neuter goes does the exact same thing as the masculine, changes to an acute with on, does the exact same thing in the dative, oisi or ois. And in the accusative, it goes to the exact same form it has in the nominative. Kain, na. Because the nominative and accusative in all Greek nouns are exactly the same, singular and plural. Those two paradigms should be enough to get you through those examples. Even though hos, he, ho, the relative pronoun, and ekkenos, ekkene, ekkeno should be enough to get you through those examples, let's look at them all one more time. Hos, he, ho, relative pronoun. Who, which, what. Another one. Ho, he, to. Very important one that you'll see all over the text. This is the demonstrative. This is the word the. It doesn't have the nu. In the neuter nominative, neuter accusative, and vocative singular. That's the only real difference between that and kalos, kale, kalon, but write it out. Practice writing out ho, hey, and to. Look, the accentual pattern, it's a little different. It can be used as a demonstrative. It can be also used as a personal pronoun. He, she, or it. It can also be used as a relative pronoun, just like hos, hey, to. Hos, hey, ho. They are, after all, very similar anyway. Ekenos, ekena, ekenos, ekene, ekeno. That is the word that. It's a demonstrative pronoun. You'll also see it, however, used as he, she, or it, more or less as a personal pronoun. Really, it's a demonstrative. It demonstrates something, it points something out. Demonstrative pronoun. And then there is autos, which we'll learn much more about later. It's a very tricky word. Autos, aute, auto. That can be used as an intensive pronoun. That very girl that you were speaking about. The self-same it can refer to. It can mean itself, herself, himself, and it can be translated as the adjective the same. Don't worry about the particular vocabulary points of autos, aute, auto at this point. That's another lesson that involves Greek syntax, and we're not at that point right now. It's good enough for you to know that it's multifunctional. Good enough for you to know that it's a pronoun of some sort at this point. And then finally, the other word that falls into this group in Lesson 8 is allos, ale, allo. And that's an adjective. It means other or another. Based on the paradigms I presented in this video lesson and in the book, make sure that you can write out the demonstrative pronoun, autos, aute, auto, and allos, ale, allo. There are exceptions that you will not be able to predict, and there are irregularities, small ones, that you won't be able to predict. But generally speaking, you should be able to go through them following the two paradigms that have been provided. And if you're having trouble doing that, just look at the book. For example, you can find the demonstrative pronoun in the back of the book. That's one that you really must memorize. The demonstrative pronoun is in section 765. If you don't have the confidence to write out the demonstrative pronoun following the paradigms in this video lesson, then look at 765 and learn them from there. And again, you will see some irregularities that you can't exactly predict from the previous ones. But the endings will be the same. The general pattern will be the same. The endings will be the same. Minor spellings to the stem or accent may change slightly. But that's not really what you're trying to learn here. You're trying to learn the endings. Same thing if you are not confident to write out autos, aute, auto by yourself. Look at section 766. And then you can have models in addition to the ones provided, hos, hey, ho, and ekenos in this lesson. Allos, ale, allo is not presented in the book, but again, it should be, if you can do those other four and find them in the book, allos, ale, allo is not as troubling as the other examples.